Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 16, verse 31. 116:31. Atmanam chanushochami bhavantam cha marottamam devan pitrin rishin sadhun sarvan varnams tatashraman atmanam chanushochami bhavantam cha marottamam devan pitrin rishin sadhun sarvan varnams tatashraman atmanam chanushochami bhavantam cha marottamam devan pitrin rishin sadhun sarvan varnams tatashramam. Translation. I am thinking about myself also, O best amongst the demigods, about you, as well as about all the demigods, sages, denizens of Pitriloka, devotees of the Lord, and all men obedient to the system of varna and ashrama in human society. Purport. To effect the perfection of human life, there is cooperation between men and demigods, sages, denizens of the Pitriloka, devotees of the Lord, and the scientific system of varna and ashrama orders of life. The distinction between human life and animal life therefore begins with the scientific system of varna and ashrama, guided by the experience of the sages in relation with the demigods, gradually rising to the summit of re-establishing our eternal relation with the Supreme Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. When God made varṇāśrama-dharma, which is strictly meant for developing animal consciousness into human consciousness, and human consciousness into godly consciousness, is broken by advancement of foolishness, the whole system of peaceful and progressive life is at once disturbed. In the age of Kali, the first attack of the venomous snake strikes against the God-made varṇāśrama-dharma, and thus a person properly qualified as a Brahmana is called a Shudra, and a Shudra by qualification is passing as a Brahmana, all on a false birthright claim. To become a Brahmana by a birthright claim is not at all bona fide, although it may be a fulfillment of one of the conditions. But the real qualification of a Brahmana is to control the mind and the senses, and to cultivate tolerance, simplicity, cleanliness, knowledge, truthfulness, devotion, and faith in the Vedic wisdom. In the present age, consideration of the necessary qualification is being neglected, and the false birthright claim is being supported even by a popular sophisticated poet, the author of Rama-Charitamānasa. This is all due to the influence of the age of Kali. Thus Mother Earth, represented as a cow, was lamenting the regrettable condition. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll again read the translation. I am thinking about myself and also about best among the demigods, about you, as well as about all the demigods, sages, denizens of Pitraloka, devotees of the Lord, and all men obedient to the system of varna and ashrama in human society. Hare Krishna. So, I first thought that because so many different categories are brought up in this verse, we can take another peruse of the Sanskrit and how Bhumi is expressing herself in this verse. So she starts off, Mother Bhumi starts off by saying to Dharma, Atmanam chanushochami. She says, I'm lamenting over and over for myself. And then bhavantam cha, and also about your worshipful self. Bhavantam is an honorific way of addressing someone you're talking to. It's like the word usted in Spanish. It's like a third person pronoun or a word, but addressing someone you're talking to. And then Amara Uttamam, O best among the immortal demigods. Amara means immortal. The demigods are, at least in reference to the material world, they're immortal. Their lifespan is so much longer than what we experience on the earth. So compared to the earth, they're amara, they are without death. And then Devan Pitrin Rishin Sadhun. And Mother Bhumi is also lamenting about the demigods, the forefathers, the sages, and the sadhus, or the devotees. And then Sarva Varnan, Sarva Varnan Tata Shraman, as well as for all the occupational and social orders of varṇāśrama-dharma. So we can ask ourselves who is not included in these categories, right? Mother Bhumi lists so many different kinds of personalities, so many different categories of jivas within this world. And so here we are seeing a very broad-minded picture of what it means to be compassionate on the part of Bhumi. Practically speaking, in our Kali Yuga brains, we would have a very difficult time actually accommodating a state of lamentation for all these different kinds of personalities. What to speak of understanding them, understanding the demigods, understanding the Pitrin, the forefathers in Pitraloka, the sages, the sadhus. We struggle enough to understand these categories of personalities. What to speak of having the capacity within our heart to actually, in a heartfelt way, lament for them. And this is especially, you could say, prominent or very especially striking in the case of Bhumi here, because Bhumi is not just someone who is philosophizing these points or, thinking from like a stoic kind of position, but rather Bhumi is in a very downtrodden condition. Psychologically, she seems to just be smashed to pieces practically. But even in this condition, her lamentation and compassion are not just focused on herself, as we might be inclined to do in this kind of situation, but rather Bhumi is expressing a worldwide and even universal-wide compassionate glance in her lamentation. At the same time, while we might look at all the different categories of personalities who are listed in this verse. We could go through a whole explanation of who is Dharmaraj, who's being addressed, who are the devas, who are the pitris, who are the rishis, the sadhus, what does it mean to follow varṇāśrama. We shouldn't lose sight of the overall picture of this verse, and where this compassion and lamentation of Mother Bhumi is coming from. This verse is in the context of her glorification of Krishna and her glorification of the great benefit the earth and universe gained from Krishna's presence, and also now the great loss that the earth and the universe as a whole will experience due to Krishna's disappearance. So this is the potential of not noticing such context is one limitation of the verse-by-verse approach to reading Shastra or classes, giving classes, which I have commonly encountered, that just by looking at each verse on its own, it's very easy to lose sight of the bigger picture of the section of Shastra that is being read, and it's very easy to lose sight of how the verse that you're reading fits into the broader point that is being made by Krishna or by Krishna's devotees. It's very important to try to understand it in an in-depth way. I had an experience of this just a couple days ago in my Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam reading group. We're reading the 11th canto, the Bhagavad-gītā, and there is a chapter, I believe it was called The Three Modes of Material Nature and Beyond. And Krishna starts off by saying how in Satya Yuga, knowledge and the goal of knowledge are one. And so, okay, he starts off with that, but then he gives a whole long explanation of how material products are made through transformations of different types of material energy. And then he explains how these different types of material energy combine together in different ways, how they retain the qualities of, the clay pot retains the qualities of the earth that it comes from, and then those qualities go back into the earth when the clay pot is destroyed, or a fire. You might light a ghee lamp and it contains the same qualities as the sun. And then, when that fire is extinguished, then there's still the energy of the sun that's existing. And then Krishna gives this whole very long explanation of how all the elements of material nature merge into each other at the time of annihilation. It's a very detailed explanation. And so in my reading group, we read all this, and then I was like, wait a second, what does this have anything to do with the first verse that Krishna pointed out? So then we had some discussion, and then we were able to come to a comprehensive understanding of how all these verses we had just read fit into the original point that Krishna was making. So my personal approach to reading Shastra, which I recommend to others, is that in addition to reading the verse by verse and carefully considering each purport in the words of the Sanskrit and their meaning, one should also read entire chapters without purports. After reading the purports, one should read the whole chapter, just the verses, or even entire cantos without purports, so that you can better understand the progression of the conversations that are being given. Otherwise, it's easy to become overwhelmed by all the details. But both a broad and detailed study are mutually beneficial to each other. They will nourish one another. So Mother Bhumi is here expressing her lamentation for the disappearance of Krishna from the earth, and she is not just lamenting for herself, she's also lamenting for Dharmaraj and for so many different categories of living entities within this universe. And why? Because Krishna has departed, and thus everything that holds together this universe and that holds together Dharma is beginning to unfurl. In fact, even before Krishna's disappearance, we saw symptoms of this. For instance, Prabhupada speaks in the purport about the degradation of the varṇāśrama system, and Bhumi is pointing out how she feels bad for the condition of the rishis and the sadhus. So we see this in the example of Kamsa, that when Kamsa was in power, under his demoniac rule, the brahmanas were not able to perform sacrifices. So many people had to flee in all different directions, all because of the corruption brought by such a king as Kamsa. So what to speak of modern times where, as Prabhupada said, the world is full of little Kamsas. Practically the entire world is all Kamsas. But by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have the opportunity to come out of this Kamsa condition, and thus we can reunite with Krishna. We can feel Krishna's presence despite his having departed. We can chant the holy names and understand that Krishna is on our tongue as we chant. And we can read Krishna's pastimes and understand that Krishna is there manifest within the pastimes. So one word that struck out to me in particular when I was first reading this verse is the word anushochami. I am lamenting. So now my question for all of you is, who amongst you can think of where else in Shastra almost the same word is found? It's conjugated differently because the grammatical tense is different, but yes, exactly. Bhagavad-gītā 2:11, Krishna says to Arjuna, this is Krishna's first response to Arjuna's lamentation at the beginning of Bhagavad-gītā. Krishna says, Ashocyan anvasochastvam pragyavadam shabhashase gatasun agatasumscha na anushochanti panditaha na anushochanti. Oh, yeah, that's another one. Yes, so what's Krishna saying in this verse 2:11? Krishna says, that which is not worthy of lamentation is what you, Arjuna, are lamenting over. And at the same time, Arjuna, you are speaking very sophisticated language. Those who are actually sophisticated in knowledge, the pundits, they do not lament for that which is living, nor do they lament for that which is dead. So we might read this and think that Krishna is being very cold-hearted, right? He's saying that a pundit, they don't lament for the living, and they don't lament for the dead either. So who's left over if you're not lamenting for the living and you're not lamenting for the dead? Who can you have compassion for? Because naturally compassion leads to lamentation. So if you're not lamenting for the living nor for the dead, then where's room for compassion? And Bhumi was just saying in the last group of verses that Krishna is Daya, he's merciful or compassionate. He's Madhavam, he's kind-hearted. He's Tyagaha, magnanimous. So how does this all fit together? So Krishna answers this in the next verse of Bhagavad-gītā. He says, Natve vaham jatunasam, natvam neme janadipaha, nachaiva na bhavishyama, sarve vayamataparam. Krishna says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And then Krishna goes on to explain the nature of the eternal soul and how the eternal soul expresses itself through devotional service, and how one can come to realize the nature of the eternal soul through different processes of yoga. So So therefore, Krishna's point isn't that a wise person or a sadhu, a pandit, a devotee should not lament for anyone, but rather that someone who's actually wise, they are lamenting for the soul. So this is the what we are seeing in the case of Mother Bhumi. She isn't just lamenting for Dharmaraj. She isn't just lamenting for the devas, for the pitris, for the sadhus, for the rishis, for the followers of varṇāśrama-dharma, but rather Bhumi is lamenting for the eternal soul, and she's lamenting for the state of how the soul's nourishment and maintenance through the systems of dharma, which is what the whole universe rests upon, is about to be, or is beginning to be, degraded due to the disappearance of Krishna. So Prabhupada points out to us specifically in the purport how the varṇāśrama system relates to the advancement of the soul and human society in general. Prabhupada said that varṇāśrama is meant for taking animal consciousness and bringing it to the level of human consciousness, and then bringing human consciousness to the level of God consciousness. But we can also understand in a more broad sense that what Prabhupada is specifically saying, how all these objects of lamentation these are all components of the overall universal system of maintenance. And this is a central point of the overall Vedic system, that there is an interlocking system of universal maintenance in which everyone is benefited by the contributions of everyone else, and by one's own contributions in relation to the whole, one is oneself benefited. This is the system of Dharma. This is what Dharma is all about. And Krishna brings this up in Bhagavad-gītā as well, chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. Krishna says, Anad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anasambhavaha yagyad bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhavaha. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yagya, sacrifice, and yagya is born of prescribed duties. And then Krishna says, Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi, brahmakshara samudbhavam, tasmat sarvagatam brahma, nityam yagye pratishtitam. Krishna says, regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifest from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So again, we can understand when we have this broader vision of what is Dharma and how do these different categories of the material universe that Bhumi is mentioning fit together, we can understand that Bhumi's point isn't just that I feel bad about these different individuals or these different groups of individuals, but rather she has the vision that now that Krishna has left, who is the central thread of all Dharma, who is himself the source of all Dharma, and who is the personification of Dharma, now what is left within the universe to hold everything together. And this is the central theme of the Bhagavatam, which comes up from the very beginning of the Bhagavatam in the conversation between Sutta Goswami and the sages at Naimisharanya. The sages at Naimisharanya saw that the age of Kali is about to commence. And so therefore they were thinking, how's the universe going to go on? How is the universe going to be maintained? How is Dharma going to be maintained? So they ask Sutta Goswami in first canto, second chapter, verse 23, since Sri Krishna, the absolute truth, the master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. And then what is Sutta Goswami's answer in the 3rd chapter, verse 43, Sutta Goswami says, Krishne svadhamo pagate dharma jnana divisaha kalau nashta drisham esha puranarko dunoditaha. Sutta Goswami says, this Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Kṛṣṇa to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So this is the answer to the question of the sages in Naimisharanya, and it's the answer to the lamentation as well of Mother Bhumi, that we can take shelter of the Bhagavat Purana, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, as we're doing in these classes every morning. And also, we'll find at the end of the 12th canto that we can and we should take shelter of the holy names, and all perfection can be achieved by chanting the holy names of Krishna, especially in worship of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam. But the important point of this verse is that the connection that can be drawn between all of these objects of lamentation that Bhumi is mentioning is that they are all involved in the upholding of Dharma within the universe. And these religious principles, these aspects of Dharma, are that which by which the universe is maintained and benefited, and it's also that by which the individual souls participating in this system are uplifted. And as Prabhupada points out, the vital aspect of human life is not to be born in a certain exalted social order. So those who are born in a Brahmana family, that's not the point. The point isn't to have some kind of position within this world, but rather the point is, how are you using your place within society and your actions within society to uplift both society as a whole and to uplift the individual. And by doing this, then that has a universal benefit. This is so much beyond our ability to conceive of as denizens of Kali Yuga. But we can just imagine that for those who actually grew up in a cohesive Vedic society, they would have been trained from the beginning of their life how all these different aspects of the universe are a cohesive whole, how they all combine together to mutually benefit each other, how the universe is maintained by all these different aspects, by the sadhus, the rishis, the pitris, the devas, and thus it would be very easy for such a person who is situated in such awareness and who is situated in performing duties in relation to the whole to then be able to understand, okay, Krishna is the backdrop behind all of this, and so therefore I should surrender my soul to Krishna. They're already used to engaging in motive goodness, dutiful, selfless actions. And so then they find out about Krishna, and very easy for them to then take to the process of devotional service. Whereas for us Kali Yugites, it's a little bit more of an uphill battle to overcome these things. But nevertheless, again, just by devotee association, by hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, serving Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, by serving the holy names, we can come to this understanding as well. So without understanding the central thread of Dharma, which is Krishna, and without understanding the central principle of Dharma, which is service to Krishna, the details of Dharma and how to apply those details is so complicated and tedious, and even in a sense you could say self-contradictory, that one cannot come to a comprehensive understanding simply by studying the Vedas bit by bit. And this is said throughout Shastra. One that came to mind immediately, Brahma Samhita 5:33, Lord Brahma says, Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhaktao. Lord Brahma says that Krishna is inaccessible through Vedic study, but he's very easily attained by the devotee. And similarly, in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11, 21, 42 to 43, Krishna is explaining the system of Vedic society and the varnas and ashramas to Uddhava. And after giving a very long explanation of the different duties and how do you understand what is a pure place, what is an impure place, how do you understand which direction to sit, what different kinds of materials are purified in different ways, gives a very, very long and in-depth explanation of all these things. And even some of the things that Krishna mentions contradicts things that he said in previous verses. So then how does one understand all these details? Well, Krishna says in text 42 of that chapter, 11, 21, 42, Krishna says, in the entire world, no one but me actually understands the confidential purpose of Vedic knowledge. Thus, people do not know what the Vedas are actually prescribing in the ritualistic injunctions of Karma Kanda, or what object is actually being indicated in the formulas of worship found in the Upasana Kanda, or that which is elaborately discussed through various hypotheses in the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas. And then Krishna says in the next verse, I am the ritualistic sacrifice enjoined by the Vedas. I am the worshipable deity. It is I who am presented as various philosophical hypotheses, and it is I alone who am then refuted by philosophical analysis. The transcendental sound vibration thus establishes me as the essential meaning of all Vedic knowledge. The Vedas, elaborately analyzing all material duality as nothing but my illusory potency, ultimately completely negate this duality and achieve their own satisfaction. So we can see practically that without understanding Krishna and without understanding the need to advance towards Krishna, to worship Krishna, without understanding these things as the central point of all dharma, the whole thing becomes distorted, it becomes confusing, it becomes polluted, and this is again something that we can see practically. Sometimes people get so caught up in all the details and the rules and regulations and the rituals, and then the actual point becomes missed. So we should understand this central point, and we are advancing directly towards this central point by engaging in devotional service. We can bypass all the intricacies of the rules and regulations of mundane dharma just by approaching Krishna directly. Of course, if we are in the conditioned state of life, it is important to take up these principles of dharma to some extent under the guidance of the spiritual master. But nevertheless, we should always keep the central point in mind. And if we understand this central point, then we can understand that rather than the perverted understanding of dharma, where one's occupational position in society is determined, rather than understanding the correct way, that one's position in society is determined by one's qualities and proclivities, the perverted understanding, the distorted understanding, is that it is determined by one's birth. Rather than understanding that one's social position in society is determined by one's lifestyle and spiritual qualifications, in the perverted Kali Yuga state, people think that one's social position is determined by the color of one's cloth. Right? If someone puts on saffron, that means they're a sannyasi, or that means they're a brahmachari. And in Kali Yuga, instead of gurus being determined by spiritual qualification and realization, so often it is determined by heredity and charisma. If you read in the Nectar of Devotion, I believe the 7th chapter, Srila Prabhupada gives a very scathing analysis of the state of hereditary bhakti, so-called hereditary bhakti, that you find even in other branches of the Gaudiya tradition, such as Nityananda Vamsha. Often there is this idea that these gurus were descended from Lord Nityananda, that Lord Nityananda had children and then those descended down, and that gives them their status as gurus. So therefore you should surrender to them in their understanding because of this supposed hereditary connection with Lord Nityananda. This isn't what our Shastras teach. This isn't what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught. This isn't what our Acharyas teach. The proper understanding is that it takes actual qualification. One's position in varnashram is based on qualification. One's position in terms of ashrama is determined based on one's qualifications. How one fits into varnashram, the guru is meant to give guidance based on the qualities and proclivities and the adhikar, the qualification that the guru observes in the disciple. So yes, things are perverted in so many ways, but if we understand the central point of Krishna consciousness, that Krishna is the center of everything, that Krishna is the basis of all dharma, that devotional service is the perfection of all principles of dharma, then we can actually make sense of all these details, and we can understand and properly apply these things in our own lives. And so then this brings up the question of what about our own lives? We must ask ourselves, how are we keeping Krishna and Krishna's devotional service as the central thread of our own activities, as the central thread of our own paradigms, and the central thread of our own aspirations? We should always be eager to look back to the central points of spiritual life, the central practices of spiritual life, and make sure that whatever's going on in our life, our relationships, our activities, our aspirations, our ways of relating to others, our ways of relating to the world, we need to make sure that all of these are oriented with Krishna and devotional service as the central thread. And if we do this, then everything in our life can become cohesive and intelligible. Otherwise, especially as sadhakas, it's easy to have this kind of fragmented feeling about devotional service. That devotional service is something that I do sometimes. Sometimes I go to the temple, sometimes I chant japa, sometimes I read the Bhagavatam. But if we actually have Krishna as the center of our life and Krishna as the center of our aspirations, and we're thinking about how we're advancing in devotional service, and we shape our activities based on that, then everything can be one in devotional service. Everything can be cohesive with itself. We don't have to have any contradictions in our lives. Of course, that is something that we have to work towards gradually. That's why the process of sadhana bhakti is there, to gradually elevate us to this. But we should always be eager to think back on how are we keeping this in mind, and how are we understanding the basics of devotional service and applying those? Are we becoming swept away by the details of devotional service, or sometimes so-called devotional service? Or are we staying rooted in the foundational points and using that as the basis for our forward advancement? So something that Ramapad Maharaj was very much stressing at ISV this past Sunday. If any of you didn't hear that lecture, I would highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. Okay, so if there are any questions or comments or reflections or complaints.
that I really appreciate that you didn't dive into the like some details because I don't know. That was kind of what I came into the lecture with. Like, oh, for some reason I don't want to dive into the Shudra Brahmana,
Mm.
and so I really appreciate that as like a lesson as well. Like I feel like that's something that I would get caught on at the super start of my Krishna conscious
Mm.
journey, and there are still some elements that I like want to emphasize more, like some of these like Vedic uh, details. But I do see how they completely can kind of like sweep you away
Mm.
from the main point. So that as like a general like lesson is very good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find in Madhya Lila, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going on pilgrimage all throughout South India, and he goes to a town called Udupi, which is the central headquarters of the Madhva Sampradaya, and he meets with the Tattvavadis. These are like the great sages within the Madhva Sampradaya. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked them, uh, what is how does one achieve the goal of life? And their answer was by following varṇāśrama-dharma and offering it to Vishnu, then one can achieve liberation. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually very almost like furious at this answer. He like really chastised the devotee who had said that and said, "What are you trying to cheat me for? Like saying this like nonsense?" And then Lord Chaitanya explained the process of devotional service in a comprehensive way. But yeah, there's this idea. You just do varnashram and then offer it to Krishna. But that's not actually the process that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taught us. So we may do varnashram, but that's always subservient to the overall points of devotional service. So we shouldn't get the two confused. I think sometimes there might be a tendency to get them confused.
Really good to hear from Mataji's thoughts
Mm.
on this specific
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Anything else? Questions, comments, reflections, complaints? Monica? Oh,
Thank you for
okay.
the good class. I was reflecting on last night I got invited to London for a workshop that was about Indigenous studies and leadership roles and how we've gotten away from different like rituals and um, things like that in that could be beneficial to leadership. So it was an opportunity to speak on Krishna consciousness and how exactly like when we're not following our dharma and this perfect system that Krishna has created, we move away from these things as well, and that's why there's all this chaos and how we need more devotees like in leadership roles and in politics to bring back this harmonious system. So yeah, a lot of the things that you were saying in class kind of tied in with what we were speaking about last night, and so those are my reflections.
Mm.
And also the class this morning was Canto 3, Chapter 16. It also had to do with the Varnashra system and how like it's about us too, but then our relationships with each other, and how that also promotes like harmonious spiritual growth. And in Kali Yuga, it's like so difficult. Like we're so removed from that, but we can remember
Jai, thank you. Hari Hari. Anything else?
I have a random question. Is it Kali Yuga? Because I mentioned the demigods, right? Is it Kali Yuga there as well? Or how do you understand that?
That is something I do not have an answer to. I haven't heard like definitively one way or the other. I believe so, but I don't. I couldn't give a reference for it.
What's the question?
That it's in the heavenly planets. It's also Kali Yuga, and that they're affected by Kali Yuga like we are.
Well, she's lamenting for them, right? Is that what the verse is saying?
I understood it as like she's lamenting because the devas have this role in universal maintenance, which is fueled by performance of yajna, and the people in Kali Yuga don't perform yajna. So therefore, the condition of the demigods and how they perform their role becomes like questionable. That was my understanding, but I'm sure that someone who knows what they're talking about would say something different.
And you were mentioning the name in Kali Yuga, a lot of people are. What was the name again? You were mentioning a name. The name of the evil man.
Oh, like Kamsa.
Kamsa.
Yeah. Well, that was what Prabhupada said.
Kamsa. Kant. Like, is there a spelling?
Yeah, Kamsa. Like who Krishna killed in Mathura.
Oh. Should be Kant. But
Yeah, different pronunciations depending on different parts of India pronounce it different.
Oh, I have one more random question. It's like at the end of Kali Yuga is the other incarnation of God, right? The one who comes and it's like
Kalki.
yeah. When he kills everyone, are people who killed by him go back to Godhead, or do they restart?
I mean, yeah, my understanding is that anyone who's killed by Krishna or his incarnations becomes liberated. Not necessarily goes back to Godhead. More often, it's that they would achieve impersonal liberation. But yeah, I don't specifically know. I would imagine that Kalki isn't just doing all the slaying himself, but that he has representatives who do it, or that it's also done through the agency of his energies, like, you know, the condition of material nature being degraded, global warming, or, you know, great disasters. We get a little description of this in the 12th canto. Markandeya Rishi he asked to see Maya, and then he saw the universal devastation, which happened through this like huge flood of the universe, and he became swept away in like this ocean that filled the entire universe. And he was like sinking and drowning in the waves of this ocean, and is like a very very horrible description. And then in the end he sees Krishna sitting on the leaf of a banyan tree on an island, and Krishna is sucking on his own toe. So that's something to look forward to. You can think about Krishna sucking on his own toe. Okay, anything else? Alright, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.